Hi everyone, welcome back to Showverse. My name is Haley Morales and I'll be talking about Arrow Season 2. Let's get started. This is a dense season. So we start off with Felicity and Deagle on a plane on their way to Lian-Yu. It kind of bothers me when they're on the plane. They don't translate the foreign language. The subtitles just say foreign language. I understand that they're doing this because, the audience is also not really supposed to, the hearing audience isn't supposed to know what the pilot is saying in a foreign language. But it would make more sense to write the subtitles in that foreign language rather than just saying foreign language. They do this all the time in the show. But it bugs me because that means if you're a hearing person and you can understand whatever language is being spoken, whether it's Russian or Mandarin or Japanese, you get more information. But if you maybe are hard of hearing or deaf or have some kind of issue there, you can't read the information, even if you know how to read Mandarin or Russian or Japanese, whatever language is being spoken. So I don't know. It's a thing that weirds me out, and it happens throughout the show. It hit me because it was right at the very beginning of season 2. I was like, oh, they really just don't care. Okay, cool. Good to know, I guess. Good to know. But either way, Felicity and Deagle are flying to Lian-Yu because Oliver just kind of decided to take a little bit of a vacation. Apparently, the undertaking kind of got to him and he just couldn't handle everything. But while Felicity is walking through the island, she steps on a landmine and Oliver saves her all Tarzan style. He's got holding on to rope and stuff, and he swings across. Explosion behind him. It's very beautiful. It's a great introduction to the season. But they are there to convince Oliver to come home because the city needs him. I mean, his mom blew up the entire Glades. The city's in turmoil. It needs the Arrow. Simple as that. Also, Thea needs him. Her last living parent is in prison for being a mass murderer, and she's not exactly handling that well. I don't think anybody would handle that well. But, of course, Oliver decided to run away. But don't worry, they're coming to get him back. Back home, Thea is running the club, and Roy is kind of taking up a vigilante role. He thinks he can do some good and help anyone he can, whether that's beating someone up or just taking a beating for somebody. Because with the absence of the Hood, of the absence of Oliver, crime's kind of gone up. No one's there to stop him. What else is going to happen? There are also a ton of new vigilantes. It's not just Roy out there. There's a whole group called the Hoods, but they use guns and they're just kind of everything Oliver was trying not to be. They seem to be killing and fighting without keeping in mind if they're actually fighting the problem person or if they're just fighting a mid person. I don't know. They're not good, and they're using the Hoods, so now Oliver, when he gets back eventually, can't really use the Hood. Doesn't really, the rep's been tarnished. But don't worry, he's got a name up his sleeve. We also get some newsposition about the Star Labs and their particle accelerator. This happens throughout the first half of the season. Just pretty much any time there's about to be newsposition, they'll do a little bit about Star Labs and their particle accelerator at the beginning, and then they'll get to whatever's important for the plot. It's very good. Good way to hype up the Flash, which started the following season after season 2. The Hoods kill the mayor live on television at a fundraiser. And they also have decided that, you know what, the entire Queen family should pay for what Moira did. And so they interrupt a board meeting that Oliver is attending because Queen Consolidated was also left without a CEO, and now Oliver kind of has to step in. Whether he likes it or not, they need him. But during a board meeting, the hoods show up to try to kill Oliver. But Oliver's able to get away, and he talks to Felicity and Deagle about how he doesn't really want to be the vigilante anymore because he's afraid he'll kill and dishonor Tommy's memory, because Tommy saw him as a killer and he decided he wasn't going to kill anymore. But the hoods attack the club that Oliver used to own, looking for him. But they find Thea instead and decide, what the hell? She's good enough. But since they took Thea, that pushes Oliver to finally suit back up. And they show a shot of the suit in like this glass cage with the, like on a mannequin, which looks so good in theory. Like, obviously it looks good. Like, they wouldn't have done that if it didn't look good. But if he was trying to get on the field quicker, the box that he used to keep it in would be a much better solution. Like, he can't exactly get it on anywhere near as quick. I have a mannequin. It's in my other room. It has chainmail on it, so it's a little bit harder to get off. But this is also like leather that he's wearing. You can trust me. It is difficult to get clothes on and off a mannequin, especially clothes that are not like cotton, like this. If it's not stretchy, oh Lord, is that difficult to get off that thing. So it is, I think, better in theory than in practice to keep his suit on a mannequin. Especially since it seems like it's his only suit. So it's not like it's, oh, that's my backup suit and my real suit's like in my backpack. No, he has to disrobe this mannequin and then get dressed and then get on the field. That's a waste of time. It's absolutely a waste of time. We also see the first signs of the Canary. At this point in the show and in the whole beginning, she's just called like the Woman in Black. And I'll be going back and forth between describing her as the Woman in Black and the Canary. But I know, she's the Canary. And she's very cool. And she is out there helping people in the Glades. And she helps Roy with fighting some would-be rapists. This is when we first meet her, is when she gives Roy a hand because he was about to be pummeled by more men that he could take on. Roy, continuing his quest to, do good even without the arrow, he's listening to the police scanner and attempts to help the FEMA trucks get through to the hospitals in time because people have been attacking the medicine trucks and the hospital is just without medication. There's just tons of people who were hurt in the undertaking or have been hurt since then, now that everything's gone to chaos, and they just don't have any freaking medicine. But while Roy is listening to the police scanners and chasing after the guys attacking the FEMA trucks, he gets in a bit of an accident and kind of rolls his vehicle. Luckily, around this time, Oliver also learns about the FEMA trucks because he's going to the hospital with Thea to help Roy out because he was in a car accident. And he's like, okay, you know what? This is going to be my first official mission as the Arrow with my new rule set, no killing, doing everything I can to just bring people in. We are just trying to make arrests here, baby. But I do want to point out, Oliver didn't leave to Lian Yu, quietly. People knew he was gone. The news reported when he got back into town. And also the Hood was gone during this time. And the Hood also showed up right when Oliver showed up. He's not great at hiding his identity. It's just... anyone paying attention would be able to notice that the Hood and Oliver seem to leave around the same time and seem to show back up at the same time. I know, technically, he was already, put on, arrested for being the Hood, and they proved him innocent and stuff, but, he does not hide it very well. He absolutely does not hide it very well. But he eventually catches the FEMA trucks and is able to get the people who were stealing it arrested. And he also finds out that Laurel has made it her absolute mission to catch and arrest the Arrow. She blames him for Tommy's death and wants to see him pay. Oliver, having, such a blind spot for Laurel, decides to go talk to her and try to see if he can, you know, fix this a little bit. But Laurel had an idea that he was going to do that, and she had a little button that she pressed, and a bunch of police officers came running in and pointing their guns at him. Very lucky for Oliver, the canary was nearby and, you know, swooped in, dropped a device that put a high-pitched screech that made everybody fall over and, like, grabbing at their ears and stuff. And she jumped in, was able to help fight off the cops until her and Oliver could escape. But she didn't stop to, like, try to talk to Oliver. She immediately left. And now Oliver's a little worried that there's this new vigilante, because he thinks, you know, the city doesn't need vigilantes, besides him, obviously. And he's also not sure if she's on the side of good or bad, and she's an unknown variable, and he needs to figure out what's her deal. Also, this isn't, like, super important to the plot, because I usually don't talk about the flashbacks too much, but there's a flashback where Shadow is messing with the fakest skeleton I've ever seen in my entire life, and it legitimately made me laugh when she was messing around with it. Just the way, like, she picks it up and the whole thing stays, like, so stiff. Like, you can tell there are screws holding it together. It's very funny to me. Like, I know they obviously need to use props. It's not like they're going to use, like, real skeletons, but it was, like, shiny. You could tell it was plastic. It made me laugh enough that I wanted to mention it. But when the undertaking happened, Iron Heights was severely damaged and a bunch of prisoners escaped. The police are trying to keep this on the down low, but one of them is a serial killer who goes back to his serial killer ways. His particular MO is kidnapping young, pretty women and pouring polymer down their throats until they suffocate. And then he dresses them up like a doll and leaves them somewhere for the police to find. Really disturbing, and also our first look into how season 2 kind of almost slips into horror territory every once in a while. Between stuff like this and the eventual villain's, like, psychological game that he plays with Oliver, it gets very horror territory, like, more than once. That you just change the music a little bit, or you stop putting them in funny costumes, and boom, you've got a horror movie going on. Like, you take away some of that CW cheesiness, and boom, horror movie. It's disturbing as hell. We also find out that the first time the dollmaker was out free, Lance was on the case, and it was happening right after Sarah had left on the boat, and all the victims were around Sarah's age, so Lance took it kind of personally, and grief does crazy things, and he just got lost in this case. He absolutely gone to the world. And so that guy being back out really messes with Lance, and the police won't let Lance on the case, so Lance goes to the Arrow for help, which is a big change from last season when he hated the Arrow with all of his might. And, you know, him and Laurel kind of switched. Now Laurel's the one trying to get the Arrow arrested, and Lance is the one working with him constantly. You know, things change. Lance and the Arrow go to see the dollmaker's lawyer that he had the first time around, and he doesn't want to talk, so the Arrow shoots him in the shoulder, which Lance thinks is a little bit too far, and honestly I'm a little inclined to agree, but I understand where he's coming from. You know, he's also still learning this new don't kill people vibe he's got going on. But the information that the lawyer gives them leads them to, I can't tell if it's a hotel or an apartment, but it's a room, some form of, like, building with lots of rooms in it. And all that's inside is a doll that's holding on to a newspaper, the front page of which being that Lance caught the dollmaker. And there's a phone sitting in front. And as soon as he Lance walks into the room. The doll maker tells Lance that he has another girl, and he's about to pour polymer down her throat. And they actually listen to it happen over the phone while Felicity's trying to track the phone. And it's, again, horror territory. This whole episode is insane to me. Like, it really bumped it up from last season. Absolutely. Felicity is able to realize, also partially with Lance's help, that multiple women use the same skin cream. So they have a feeling, they never figured out what the doll maker used to pick his victims last time. They think it might be people who care about their skin, so they would buy this specific really expensive cream. And it's only at these specialty boutiques, which I doubt every single girl used the same face cream. He probably just stakes out the specialty boutiques for women that he thinks are pretty and has nice skin. Felicity offers herself up to be bait, which almost nobody is happy with, but they do it anyway because they really don't have much else to go by. Also, during this episode, Roy is trying to find the woman in black that helped him with the fight the rapist, and he ends up talking with this girl named Sin for information. She runs away, and Roy chases her until she knocks him out, and she brings him back to this clock tower that her and the girl in black, or the canary, are staying in. At this point, the doll maker also realizes that Felicity is bait and, like, goes after her, but then lets her go pretty quickly and immediately kidnaps both Lance and Laurel. While Roy is in the clock tower, he gets a call from Felicity saying that Laurel's in trouble, and the canary hears that and is like, let him go, and she also takes off because that's an important person to her. We'll find out in just a second. Don't even worry about it. And she shows up and she kills the doll maker, even though Oliver is trying not to kill this time around. Yeah, she just kills the doll maker and then leaves. But we follow the canary back to the clock tower. The camera does. And there's a man who's dressed in the same clothing that Malcolm Merlin did when he was being the Dark Archer. And that man tells the canary that if she does not return to Ra's al Ghul, some trouble's about to happen. And if you know anything about comics or DC lore, you know Ra's al Ghul is a big Batman villain. That he is the leader of the League of Shadows. You know a lot of information just hearing those words. But turns out Canary knows him. Felicity makes the connection that the canary might not be following Oliver like they thought she was, that she might be following Laurel, because Laurel was in the office when the police surrounded Oliver. She was in the Dollmakers. Because Laurel was in the office, obviously, when the police surrounded Oliver, because she was the one that hit the button. She was also, obviously, at the Dollmakers, and was in another place that they had run into each other. So Oliver heads over to Laurel's apartment and finds the canary on the opposite street watching her. And Oliver finds out that this is Sarah, Laurel's little sister that he took on the Queen's Gambit that he thought died. I do love that during this scene, he's got Sarah, like, trapped. She's still in her getup and everything. But he's like, who are you? I need to know who you are. I need to know your intentions. She's like, if you found out, Ollie, you'd never be the same. She calls him Ollie. And that makes him realize this girl that he's like feet from looks a lot like Sarah. And he pulls off her bright blonde wig to reveal her slightly dirty blonde natural hair. Ah, like magic. It's a new girl. This, if you can't tell, this kind of bothered me that you're like this close to a person. I know it's been a while since they've seen each other, but we also find out in the flashbacks that I don't really talk too much about, like, he saw her a year at, so it's only been, at this point, 5 years, because it's been a year since he returned. But, like, It hasn't been 6 years since the Queen's Gambit. It's been 5 years since he's seen her. And at pretty traumatic times. So like her face should be ingrained in his, but he can't recognize her because she's got a black band and brighter hair. I know he thought she was dead, but like, come on, man. You're right there. Anyway, Laurel starts throwing herself into work, and one of her coworkers notices and asks her out to dinner. She agrees, she gets some free food, but then she bounces. But she was drinking a little too much during that free dinner, and she gets pulled over by the cops. And she's over the limit. And they call Lance, who gets really worried because he's an alcoholic, and you know, that can be hereditary, and she might be an alcoholic. And he's worried about her. Now that Oliver knows that Sarah is alive, he's trying to convince her to tell her family that she's alive and in town. But she says that, you know, that she can't. There's too many reasons. She can't explain why, but she can't. During this, we also see a man in a very creepy, like, skull-based mask injecting people with some kind of liquid. And that's concerning. But we just get flashes of that before the next episode. Don't you worry about it. Don't worry about it. During this whole thing, Moira is on trial for, you know, the undertaking and her part in it. She spent 5 months in jail waiting trial, and now she gets to her pre-trial, and the DA wants the death penalty. And that's unthinkable for most of them. Laurel is also working for the DA, and she gets put on the case. She's able to convince them to offer up life for a guilty plea and not the death penalty. After the pretrial, Oliver and Sarah go back to Oliver's house, and they are attacked by another man dressed like the Dark Archer was. And Oliver immediately, after they get away from that, takes Sarah to his little bat cave, and he starts trying to figure out who this person is and why he's dressed like Malcolm Merlyn and why is he trying to kill Oliver. But Sarah says, actually, he's from the League of Assassins, which Malcolm Merlyn also learned from, and he's not here for you, he's here for me, because I left to go check on my family after the undertaking, and I just kind of never went back, which is also why I can't tell them I'm alive, because I'm a killer, and she can't really stand the killing anymore, so she doesn't want to go back, but at the same time, nobody leaves the League. One person has left the League, and it was Malcolm Merlyn, and we can see how that turned out. Not great. Now the League is in town and threatening Sarah's family as well as people that are close to her, so they split up. Oliver goes to talk to Laurel, and he sees that there's like a knife in Laurel's wall, which he knows means that they're going to go after Lance. Felicity was sent to go talk to Lance, but Lance doesn't believe her, so Sarah has to come out and talk to her dad about the fact that she's alive. They go out to a restaurant to talk for a little bit where Lance sees how jumpy and like reactionary she is now, which frightens him. I mean, it would frighten anyone when your child is now like in fight or flight mode at all times. But she takes him back to the clock tower where 3 of the League of Assassin people are waiting for them. They get into a bit of a scuffle, and 2 of the League of Assassins are killed. One of them also mentions and calls her the Beloved and talks about the child of Ra's al Ghul. So we could piece together that she means a little something to Ra's al Ghul's family. They let one of the League of Assassins guys go with a message that Sarah's family is off limits and not to come back and hurt them. Sarah also tells Lance that Laurel and her mom cannot know that she's alive. They will not stop trying to look for her, and that's going to get them killed. And then Sarah leaves, disappears back into the ether to continue to run and hide from the League. Deagle is contacted by Argus to come visit because it turns out Lila, who we find out later is his ex-wife, is missing in Russia. So Oliver, knowing that he's not going to let Deagle go by himself, makes a plan to go visit the Russia branch of Queen Consolidated. He never steps a single foot into that facility. But it's his excuse so that he can leave town on the private jet. And while they're there, Oliver meets with his contacts in the Russian mob and is able to get Deagle arrested in the same gulag that Lila is in. Once he's in there, he gets into a bit of a fight, gets taken to the cold room, where he sees Deadshot, which is the person Lila was looking for when she went missing. She found him in a gulag in Russia. But the plan was that Deagle would get in the cold room so that a guard could come in and let him out without alerting everyone in the prison, because it was supposed to be empty. But Deadshot also frees himself, kills the guard, letting Deagle know that he knows where Lila is, and now he needs Deadshot to get out. Not Deagle's favorite plan, but it's the only one he's got. They go get Lila. They're able to just barely get out, and Deagle's like, Deadshot, get the fuck out of this car as soon as they are clear. Before he goes, Deadshot lets Deagle know that he didn't miss his target and his brother. Deagle's brother was the target, and the person who made the hit was someone whose code name is the Hive. While Oliver and friends are in Russia, Moira's lawyer tells Thea that she needs to break up with Roy. Roy's willing to do it until Moira catches wind, and she shuts that shit down right away. Like, she's not going to let Thea ruin her life in order to make her look better to the jury. Not going to happen. You remember when I said that the Iron Heights was damaged during the undertaking? Yeah, the Count is also a person that got out. You know, the crazy dude who makes the vertigo. And he has a new strain. And now people who have never even taken vertigo. Oh, hello, Bubba. We have a cat visitor. Now people who haven't even taken vertigo are addicted to it for some reason. With a little bit of, tracing people's whereabouts, Felicity's able to figure out that he put it in a flu vaccine van that was making its rounds from office building to office building. Unknowingly, inject people with vertigo and make them addicted so that they would have to buy the Count's supply. Great business, supply and demand, truly. But once they were able to find the Count, he kind of figures out that Oliver Queen is the Arrow, and he kidnaps Felicity and holds her hostage. And when Oliver shows up, he threatens to inject Felicity with a lethal dose of vertigo. And Oliver is forced to kill the Count. This is the first person that he, knowingly kills while on this new plan to not kill anybody in honor of Tommy. During all this, Moira's actual trial shows up. They find out that Moira and Malcolm Merlin had a bit of an affair a few years ago. Somehow, she is found not guilty. Which, when she's being taken home, her driver takes her to a parking lot where she sees Malcolm Merlin, who they thought was dead. Turns out he assisted with that not guilty verdict because he found out that Thea Queen is his daughter. That little affair was exactly when she got pregnant with Thea. And it's all legit. Blood tests will prove. She's Malcolm's kid. Yay! We also find out that the man in the mask hired the Count to kill Oliver. And we see a scene of him making more progress with his serum that he's injecting people with, and somebody actually survives the injection. Cut to the very next episode where somebody with super strength steals a industrial centrifuge from Queen Consolidated Applied Sciences. This is where a little dude named Barry Allen from Central City shows up to give them some help. According to Barry, there's been some similar crimes in Central City, and he's just there to help. But, you know, if you're into comics or superheroes at all, you might recognize the name Barry Allen. He's not the Flash yet. He's just a dorky dude right now. But while Barry is there to help, him and Felicity get really chummy, and they seem to be hitting it off, which makes Oliver seem a little uncomfortable. It's kind of hard to tell, is he uncomfortable because they're hitting it off and he might maybe have feelings for Felicity? Or is he uncomfortable because there's somebody else helping the team and getting like really close and potentially finding out his secret? It's kind of hard to tell because it's not like he comes out and says it. Barry is able to figure out and point out that it's not a group of guys like the police seem to think. It's one very strong boy. He points that out with, you know, not only the footage that only shows one guy anyway, but they just assumed one guy came in and like knocked out the cameras and then the rest of the team came in because it was a pretty heavy machine that he stole. But he's able to prove it with footprints in the video and other things that this is one very strong dude. We also find out that Barry is a little bit of a vigilante fanboy. He is obsessed with a vigilante. He knows a bunch of information about him. He gets really excited because Felicity seems to also know some stuff because she's like talking to him about it and like it's very cool. And she was also saved by the vigilante and like, oh, very exciting stuff. He tells Felicity that part of the reason he's so obsessed with the Arrow is because his mom was killed and he thinks if someone like the Arrow had been around, they could have helped solve who killed her. Malcolm is also showing up to threaten Moira that if she doesn't tell Thea about Malcolm being Thea's dad, then bad things are going to happen. But Moira tells Malcolm that she told Ra's al Ghul about his role in the undertaking, and Ra's is not happy because what he did violates like everything the League stands for. So he's got to run, which just gives them like a lot of time to hopefully not have to tell Thea ever that Malcolm is her dad. The big strong boy that stole the industrial centrifuge is also now stealing O-negative blood, which seems a little weird until Oliver tells the team about the Mirakuru that a Dr. Ivo was trying to find on the island. This Mirakuru is like a super serum that gives people great strength and healing abilities, and we also find out that a man named Brother Blood, or Sebastian Blood, is the one calling all the shots, and he's the dude in the skull mask, and he is indeed making Mirakuru. Oliver, in either his jealousy or nervousness about having a stranger working with them, learns that there is no similar crimes in Central City, and actually Barry is supposedly at home with a head cold, not here in Starling helping them with a case. This unlocks Barry's tragic backstory TM, which I will go into a lot more detail in The Flash. Also, if you know who Barry Allen is in The Flash, you know the tragic backstory. Look how long this video is already, and look how long it still has to go. We just don't have time. Trust me, it gets hit on the head 100 times in The Flash, which this confrontation makes both Barry and Felicity uncomfortable and kind of pushes them away, but Oliver feels a little guilty, especially after hearing that tragic backstory TM, and he invites Barry to a welcome back party for his mom, now that she's, considered innocent. He's throwing this big ball, and, nobody shows up. Apparently, even though the jury found her innocent, maybe the city doesn't. But there's, a scuffle later on, and Barry tries to head home on the train, but he, misses it by 5 minutes, which is good, because during the scuffle, Oliver gets injected with something, and Felicity goes to Barry for help. And Barry figures out Oliver is the Arrow. Oliver's coding, and Barry ends up giving him some rat poison to help him by thinning out the blood. But once Oliver wakes up, he's really mad at Felicity for just telling Barry his secret, and even though it saved his life, it's not great. We find out that Blood is trying to inject like 100 more people with that super serum. And I mentioned that Roy is being like a little mini vigilante. Well, he'd been trying to work with the Arrow, but he was getting way too far into it and not following his orders. So the Arrow shoots Roy in the leg. This isn't a great thing. Roy now kind of resents the Arrow a little bit. And Roy, Thea, and Sin, the girl from before, decide that, you know what, they don't need the Arrow's help. They can do good without him. This leads them onto a little mission that gets Roy captured and injected with Mirakuru. Since Oliver was out, he's been having hallucinations and he's just not able to focus. He thinks his blood is tainted, but Barry checks it and it's fine. It's probably just all the stress and everything working his head. But because of this, he can't really work cases very well. So he calls Lance for help with the big strong boy. Lance pulls together a little team to go, catch him by surprise and hopefully take him in. But there is a dirty cop that overhears the plan and like jumps in on the team, and everybody, like half the team dies because the dirty cop gave them a heads up, and it was a whole plan to stop everything. Sebastian Blood also begins his campaign for mayor. Turns out, super serum isn't his only hobby. He also goes to meet with the dude who gave him the recipe for Mirakuru, Slade Wilson, who was with Oliver on the island, and Oliver thinks is dead. And there's a lot of backstory here, and it's kind of hard to cover, but really quickly, Slade helped Oliver get away from the first people who were on the island, and they also save a girl named Shadow. Oliver and Shadow got into a relationship, but it turns out Slade also had feelings for her. And when Dr. Ivo is there trying to do the Mirakuru stuff, he ends up killing Shadow, but Oliver and Slade both kind of see it as Oliver's fault because Dr. Ivo put both Shadow and Sarah, who was there at the time, both down, pointed a gun, and like made Oliver choose, which Oliver didn't really choose. It was more of Ivo threw the gun in Sarah's direction and he just kind of jumped in front of her, and then he just very quickly went and shot Shadow. Like, he didn't really choose. It was just more of like he went in front of the gun at the time, but he was also still like tied up and he could only move so fast, so it's not like he could follow the gun. And I don't see it as Oliver's fault, and like Sarah doesn't see it as Oliver's fault. She knows that, Ivo was gonna kill him anyway, like. But they both, Oliver and Slade, blame Oliver, which is really all that matters, because most of this is just Slade's personal vendetta against Oliver. That's the most we'll probably talk about that, just because it's so. I could get very in detailed. We could make a similar video length talking about just this. Also, at the end of these episodes, at the mid-season finale, Barry goes home in order to see the Star Labs particle accelerator get turned on. He makes it home just in time, and when it goes off, Barry's hit by some lightning, and he goes into a coma. This is where he gets his Flash powers, and we will see him in the next post. Actually, I'll be talking about the Flash next, so we'll see him later. But he's like out he's in a coma for the whole second half of Arrow season 2. And they like mention that like Felicity goes to go visit him every once in a while. But yeah, he's in Central City. Star Labs is actually taking care of him and stuff. Again, we'll get into it more. But he's in a coma for literally the rest of this time. Really good advertisement for the Flash to have him in this show. After the mid-season finale, there is a 5-week jump, and Oliver spends this 5 weeks tracking down lowlifes in the city, beating them up in hopes that they have literally any information about the man in the skull mask. No one really does. Also, during this 5 weeks, Roy's been acting very weird. He was injected with Mirakuru. He survived. He now has the super serum inside of him. Makes sense that he's acting funny. The Mirakuru doesn't just affect your muscles, it also affects your mind, and it makes it really easy for you to get angry and not be able to pull yourself back out of that, and you can get like lost in rage to fight, which is part of what they wanted it to do originally, you know, doing it for super soldiers, so that would be beneficial to them. Also, there's a man blowing up buildings because he has declared war on the politicians of Starling City, which he reveals in his manifesto he posts online. And everybody is, you know, warned to try to stay inside, stay away from, like, big buildings and stuff. But Sebastian is holding a unity rally because, and I quote, "Living in home and in fear is no way of living." That sentence is a little triggering right now in this COVID situation. I don't think he would like the COVID restrictions. During his little rally, a bomb goes off. Really big surprise there, but, you know, hey, why not? This bomb knocks over this large, like, metal thing that holds lights. And it's about to hit Moira, but Roy catches it and is able to push it off. And, like, you shouldn't be able to do that. It's supposed to be really, really heavy. He kind of hand waves it off as being like, you know, when a mom is able to lift a car to get her child out, it's just that burst of adrenaline, but, like, it's the super strength. Also, during this time, Oliver's being kind of a dick towards Felicity. He's being really hard on her. There's points where, you know, she's trying to do stuff, but this guy also has, like, some knowledge about tech and radio frequencies, so he's subverting her in places. And Oliver says that it's her job to make sure that he doesn't get left behind when he's trying to chase people. Just really giving her a ton of shit. I think because he's really jealous of the fact that she keeps going to visit Barry in Central City. And he eventually apologizes to her and says, "I have been really hard. It's just when you go to Central City, it makes me realize how much we need you here." I'm just like, it's not really, like, a reason to be treating her like shit, because now she's acting... It's not great. Laurel is really suspicious of Sebastian Blood. She really thinks he's up to something. And she goes to visit his aunt in an insane asylum, only to figure out that's not his aunt, it's his mom. And the reason she's there is because Sebastian killed his father when he was younger, and his mom witnessed it and the little Sebastian was able to convince people that his mom was crazy, that was actually his aunt, and be put into an insane asylum and, you know, out of the way. Sebastian, of course, being a powerful man, has the nurse let him know if his mom gets any visitors. So he goes and he asks her, you know, "What did you talk to Laurel about?" And she apologizes, saying that she told her everything. And she goes, please, I'm so sorry." And he goes, "Yes, Mom, I know." And he leaves only to come back in the skull mask and kill her. Good job. But Laurel is, you know, trying to figure out the stuff about Sebastian, but the police aren't really helping. So she goes to the Arrow for help. But Oliver wants to make sure that Sebastian actually killed his own father when he was younger, because, I mean, Oliver at this point has publicly endorsed Sebastian Blood for mayor. Like, they're kind of buds at this point. And so he needs Laurel's help to get into the county records in order to find the case file to see if, like, maybe the gunshots came from below, from a little boy. But by the time they get it, the case file's empty. And we find out towards the end of this episode that Slade went and emptied the file and tells Sebastian if he keeps fucking up, he's gonna be in trouble. Because his actions almost got his file looked at, which was for some reason even still there. Like, he should have had that destroyed a long time ago, because it has evidence that the gunshots did indeed, you know, come from a scared lower angle, most likely a child. I don't know why he would have left those. Even, like, that file should have been destroyed forever ago. There's no reason that file should have still existed, especially as soon as he announced his campaign for mayor. That should have been gone. Now that Roy fully realizes that he has these new abilities, he decides he doesn't really need the Arrow's help, and him and Sin go to try to take down this, like, sleazy lawyer guy who picks up hookers and then slices them up. Slices the throats. So Sin poses as a hooker, and the dude takes the bait immediately. He's like, "Oh, you're new," and Roy beats this guy like almost to death. Like they really have to pull this guy away from Roy. And once Oliver finds out, he immediately is like, "You could have really hurt something," and he offers as the Arrow. Like Roy still doesn't know who he is, but he offers to start training him in some control methods, and maybe eventually he can help him out in the field. Slade also tells Blood that he needs to take care of Laurel because she's digging deep. So he has the dirty cop on the payroll go to Laurel's apartment and find the prescription drugs that Laurel's been taking, because she is an alcoholic. She is addicted to both alcohol and drugs, and she stole her dad's medicine and has been taking it. And she gets arrested for popping pills. So now anytime she tries to say anything about Blood, she's just seen as an addict who's gone crazy, and she actually gets suspended from the DA's office for substance abuse. Her life starts going downhill very quickly. But once they come back from the police station, Oliver's there to help Laurel kind of clean up the apartment and get the pills away from her and stuff. But while they're there, they both get knocked out and Laurel gets kidnapped. And when Oliver wakes up, there's this "tell the Arrow to meet at this location" written on the wall. So Oliver goes to the location, finds Laurel, and they fight with a guy in the skull mask. And Laurel kills him. Like straight up, they're fighting and like some bullet holes start showing up in the back and Laurel's there. But it's not Blood in the skull mask. It's one of his goons. It's the dirty cop who they've already planted all of the evidence needed to blame literally everything on him in his apartment. So now everything's scot-free. How could you think Blood was like that? That's crazy. We get back to Iron Heights, where a man has been brought in who, once he gets in the cell, starts kind of cutting himself open and pulls out some blades and some knuckles go together because he's in a cell with the Bronze Tiger, who Oliver got arrested at the very beginning. He was part of the plot for the FEMA trucks. But this dude has been hired to get the weapons to the Bronze Tiger so the Bronze Tiger can get out. So the man's family could get some money that they desperately need. But the Bronze Tiger does leave, and he gets hired on to do a little heist at Malcolm Merlin's old place. And they're trying to steal the prototype earthquake machine, like the ones used in the undertaking. During this, Roy is working with Oliver to work on his control, and Oliver does the same, like, slapping the water technique that Shadow used for him when she was teaching him how to pull back a bow. Because even though Roy has the strength to do it, he doesn't have the control. So he, slapping that water. During this, Lance is really nervous about Laurel and tricks her into coming to an AA meeting, which is not a good way to get someone to an AA meeting. She immediately gets angry. She immediately runs off, refuses to admit she has a problem, and it's quite some time before she does anything about it in the future. My cat's back. This is Bee, by the way. I called her Bubba earlier, but that's just her nickname. This is Bee. When Oliver goes to confront the Bronze Tiger, he ends up bringing Roy with him, mainly because they knew it was important, but they also weren't sure how many people were going to be there. And at the end of the day, Roy's beating the shit out of Bronze Tiger, and the only way Oliver can even get through to him is to take his mask off so that Roy will look at him and remind him of Thea, which has been the only thing that ever get him out of his rages when he does get into them. So he's just able to stop him before he completely kills the Bronze Tiger, so that he can go back into prison. But now Roy knows that Oliver is the Arrow. A lot of people are learning Oliver's secret this time around. This also really sets Roy up with these rage-like things for a really good villain arc, which he doesn't really end up getting, which is not a bad thing. I prefer him not, like, being a good guy. But they do set him up like he might turn against Oliver almost at any point, whether it's his choice or not. He has a little bit of something, like, later on, but it's, I don't know. It's a lot shorter than you'd expect it to be. During this, Walter, Moira's husband from the first season, shows back up and is wondering if Moira maybe wants to run for mayor, which she thinks is absolutely insane. Like, she was just taken off trial for, all the deaths, the 503 people that died in the undertaking. There's no way this city would vote for her until she brings it up to Thea, and Thea's like, it's not all that crazy. I mean, like, I'd vote for you, and she's just turned voting age, so. But Moira is still worried about it because she's really worried, like, a trial is one thing, but a mayoral campaign can get really feisty, and she really doesn't want people to find out that Malcolm Merlyn is Thea's dad. But, I mean, with some convincing, she eventually agrees and, decides to throw her hat in for mayor. We also see Amanda Waller show up in order to recruit the Bronze Tiger for the Suicide Squad. Yay! Amanda Waller is always great. Definitely not constantly the worst character ever. Laurel has also been in, like, a deep, deep spiral. And Oliver calls Sarah to help. Like, she needs to come back and help her family. Laurel is at her home drinking when she sees Sarah, and she's like, what the hell? And then she also passes out and hits her head and ends up in the hospital. We find out because she's been poisoned with some Tibetan snake venom is why she did, but she assumes it was a hallucination. She tells Lance about it, and he calls up the Arrow and is like, whoa, is my daughter back in town? And put her on the phone and stuff, and they end up talking for a little bit. It's a nice moment. But around the same time Sarah shows up, so does this mysterious woman who turns out to be Sarah's past lover and the child of Ra's al Ghul, the heir to the throne. Cool. Her name is Nyssa. She's really neat, but man, does she bring a lot of trouble with her. Because she's decided, you know what, now that she's got Sarah here, she doesn't care. She will kill her family or bring Sarah back. Maybe even bring Sarah back dead. Who knows? She's upset. I mean, even when she's given the chance to kill Sarah, she can't do it. At the end of the day, she still loves Sarah. Like, she's able to pull herself out of it enough to not kill her. Felicity is able to put together, like, the timeline of the affair and Thea's birth, and that Malcolm Merlyn is Thea's dad. And she tells Oliver a little sad story about her own family as a way to soften the blow when she tells Oliver the news right before Oliver is going to go up to endorse his mom for mayor. He had to rescind his endorsement for Sebastian Blood to endorse her, which he does. He does still go up. He endorses her fully, and then he walks up to her and goes, I know, and later tells her that he's done with the lies, and you know what? In public, they are still mother and son. He will do everything he can to make sure the public and Thea still thinks they're, two peas in a pod or however close they need to be. But he's done with her. Just not going to happen anymore. Sorry. Their relationship is done where he's concerned. So back to Nyssa and Sarah. Sarah decides to drink more of the snake venom in order to kill herself so that Nyssa won't kill her family or take her back. But this almost backfires. Like, if it wasn't for Oliver showing up with his magic tea leaves that he got from the island that can cure like 90% of poisons, Nyssa had promised while she was holding Sarah that she was going to kill her family anyway. You know what? Fuck it. But Oliver's able to bring Sarah back, and Nyssa decides, rather than risk losing Sarah again that way, forget it. She releases Sarah from the League. She's like the second person to ever be released. It was Malcolm Merlyn, and now Sarah. And so Sarah, like, shows herself to her family, basically. They show up I mean, Nyssa was also holding her mom, so like her mom sees Sarah and stuff, but she lets herself be fully seen by them. She comes home with them, and Laurel is pissed. Laurel is pissed at Sarah for cheating with Oliver, going on the boat, not telling them that she was still alive, putting them all in danger. After this, both Oliver and Sarah are both sad TM, from the troubles with their family, and they start hooking up. Oliver decides to host a welcome back from the dead party for Sarah. He got one, why not? During the party, Lance apologizes for how hard he was on Oliver, that, he was obviously still blaming him for Sarah's death, but he can see now that he's actually not that too bad of a guy, which is it's very strange to have Lance not mind Oliver as both the Arrow or as Oliver Queen when he hated him so much in both facets last season. During the party, Lance and Sarah's mom is also getting a little handholdy. They seem to be getting along, at least. Sarah kind of joins the team, and Felicity starts feeling really left out now that both Deagle and Sarah are out in the field with Oliver, and she's still back in the Batcave, and she's feeling a little inadequate. And I think at least a little bit of it is because she kind of has a crush on Oliver, and it's not helping that now Oliver and Sarah are also dating. They're dating and they're crime fighting together, and she's just left to be the girl in the chair. While she's feeling inadequate, there's a villain known as Takman, who uses smarts to get into banks and stuff, and he also breaks into their system and uploads a virus that makes all the computers explode. So not only is she feeling inadequate because she can't go out there and fight, she's also failing at the computer side of it. Deagle gives her a pep talk that no matter what, she could be having a hard time, things could not be going her way, but she's irreplaceable and they need her. Which she absolutely needed to hear, but I think it would have meant a little bit more coming from Oliver, even though obviously it did, it was still good coming from Deagle, but Oliver's, was treating her kind of crappy when she was talking with Barry, and now they got back to neutral only for him to go to Sarah, so now it's just, he hasn't been treating her the best for a little while. Lance is also trying to hold a family dinner in hopes that those little hand-holdy moments at the party actually stick, and maybe Laurel and Sarah's mom would like to stay here in Starling City and maybe get back together with him. But during the dinner, Sarah invites Oliver to come along, and they find out that their mom actually has no plans to come back to Starling because she has met someone and they're maybe seeing each other in Central City. And so that makes Lance really sad, and Sarah and Oliver are kind of exchanging glances. Laurel picks up on that and she's like, "Are you kidding me?" And she blows up and yells at everybody at the table. Their mom for leaving, their dad for thinking their moms was just going to come back, and what did she expect, and for Sarah for leaving and putting her in danger, and now coming back be with Oliver, and Oliver, tearing him apart in the first place only to do this again. And she storms out, and Oliver storms after her, and he's like, "You know what? I'm really tired of you blaming literally everyone else for your drug problems, your family problems, your job problems, that even though he has family problems and stuff going on right now, he's here with her, and he's trying to help her through things any way he can." And he just says, "You know what? I can't right now." And he goes back into the room with the rest of the family. And he also gets a phone call from Felicity because Takman, they ruined one of his big grabs. So they pulled some stock out, put it in Oliver's vault in hopes that it would make Takman come after it. And it did. And they know this because Felicity was using the bank system while in the bank because their computers are still fried from the virus. So they have to rush in there to save her. But when they show up to help save Felicity, she actually ends up following Sarah into the basement where Takman is. And she's able to upload the same virus Takman put on their computers that made him blow up to his phone, which shocks him because it's in his pocket, puts him down. So they're able to capture him, and she did it. Hey, she did her smarts, and she was out there in the field and still got through it all. She ends up actually getting shot in the shoulder too, so now she also has scar and stuff. Like, they're like, you should go to the hospital. And she's like, none of you guys go to the hospital. Just patch me up right here. And it's very good. It's a good little moment. Thea also hires Sarah to be the new bartender because her old one, just decided to leave and without really any notice. But Sarah used to be a bartender before she got on the boat, so it's fun. Good way to kind of bring her back to normal and get her back into being home. Thea also calls Oliver home in an emergency. He has to come right now because she's actually been sensing that Oliver and Moira, his mom, haven't been really on the same page as they used to be. So she calls him for an emergency, but really she's not even there. But when Oliver bursts into the house, Moira is having a meeting with Slade Wilson. And Oliver's freaking out. He sits there and he's like trying to have a nice conversation with Slade. The second Moira leaves the room, Oliver like tries to stab Slade with a shiv and they're like fighting together, but then Thea comes home, so he has to stop, and Thea is, told by their mom to give Slade a tour of the house because apparently he's said he's like into paintings and stuff, so now they're being toured around the house. And Oliver finds a way to secretly call Felicity, who luckily Sarah's down there with her because when Felicity puts it on speaker, Sarah hears Slade's voice and is like, oh shit, this is serious business. And Sarah shows up and so does Roy because he was also there. A bunch of people just kind of converge on the house and just casually come in like, hey, I was just checking in on you. And as they stare Slade down, they're like, just checking in on you guys. Nothing to worry about here. And Oliver walks Slade out and they have a little conversation about some stuff. Well, Deagle is meant to be lining up a headshot, but Slade had one of his men prepared and looking for someone, so they're not able to get the shot. Originally they're not really sure what he was doing there, but we find out he was putting little tiny cameras basically on every single thing he touched in the house. Now that Oliver knows that Slade is alive, he goes to the Russians for help finding Slade. Deagle is also now watching Felicity's house and has put extra security detail on Oliver's mom, and Roy is spending a lot of extra time with Thea. Sarah's watching Laurel. Everybody is, attached to somebody. But Felicity ends up kind of shooing Deagle away, and Deagle ends up being brought in by Amanda Waller with Lila, his ex-wife, to work on the first mission of the Suicide Squad, or as Amanda calls it, Task Force X. When they're meeting the task force, there's a little Harley cameo. Deagle and Lila are like not seeing eye to eye on this, and they're like kind of arguing, and then you hear a voice go, do you all need counseling? I'm a licensed psychiatrist or therapist or whatever. And you just see a silhouette of like some crazy hair, and then they kind of bang on the door and she scuttles away. They end the scene. But there's just a little Harley cameo. Just so that, if they had the ability, they would have put Harley in the show, I guess. During this, Oliver's trying to handle a robbery, and he stumbles upon Slade's mask that was left on Leon Yu that like had an arrow in the eye. That Slade obviously picked up and brought back to Starling City. Back with Task Force X, dude named Shrapnel tries to run away, and that's when they find out that Amanda Waller has explosives in the back of their head. Deagle's not fine with this at all. And he actually gets really mad at Lila for being anywhere close to cool with it. But they continue on with the plan. They're supposed to sneak into a party and get a nerve agent out. They think it's just a quick, pocket it and move on. But Deadshot, who's on the team, heads down to go pick it up, and it's huge. Amanda uses his fake eye as a camera to get her eye on it, and then she launches a drone. And so she's going to blow up the entire house and everyone in it. But Deagle and Lila are able to get most of the people out, including Deadshot. But then they find out that Waller wasn't setting the drone to the house. She was setting the drone to Deadshot. So now that he's in the car, the drone is following them and trying to shoot them, and Lila cuts out his implant and is able to throw it out like right before the drone hits. And that's, you know, a great ending. They end up, Amanda realizes the implants are too easy to get out and they're going to move them to their spinal cords from now on. Doing this, Oliver actually runs out of favors with the Russian mob because he asks for help finding Slade, but he refuses to do a return favor. So they're like, this is the last one, no more. And he does this classic, you know, stay away from me to keep you safe to Sarah, of all people, the person who also knows Slade and has been trained by the League of Assassins to be like an assassin, but whatever. And he goes off by himself, which is just a great choice. And when Oliver gets to where the Russians say the Slade should be, they find a dead body, which I'm pretty sure is the Russian, but honestly I didn't look at it and they didn't like focus on it super long. But I'm pretty sure it's the Russian. And there's a video of Shadow playing on the wall on like a projector. This gets him to finally open up to Sarah and they get back to, you know, normal and finally working together. Oliver also goes to Amanda Waller with help tracking and dealing with Slade Wilson. And she pulls up some info on someone named Deathstroke, which is Slade. The Arrow helps catch Bertinelli, one of the dudes from season 1. And when Oliver's standing over him, he asked, did my daughter send you to kill me? So the team immediately starts planning for Helena when she gets back into town. Laurel is also offered a job back at the DA's office, and her first case is the Bertinelli case. She finds out the dude who offered her the job back is using both her and Helena's dad as bait for Helena. This backfires, and Helena ends up taking a good chunk of people hostage, and this hostage situation eventually leads to just Laurel being taken hostage separately and her dad getting killed, but not by her, and she ends up saying to Oliver that he was right. Just because her dad's dead doesn't mean she feels any different. She's like real mad that he's right because revenge was supposed to fix it. It was supposed to make her heart feel better, and it didn't. I also want to point out that Oliver is an emotional manipulator. When Roy can't keep his anger in check, he tells him that he can't see Thea anymore. Even though that's like his one grounding thing, is like you could bring up Thea and he snaps him right out of it. But no. Because he's having some troubles keeping in his anger that's being fueled by a super serum. He's got to dump Thea. And it sends him like extra angry for a while. And it also pisses off Thea. And it just hurts everybody. And Thea's upset when she's walking home and Slade Wilson pulls up. And because she knows him as a family friend, she gets in the car. And he kidnaps her and brings her to Blood, who takes her hostage. Like, she wouldn't have been out on the street. She would have been with Rory. But Oliver, you know, uses his team's connections with other people to his advantage sometimes. Oliver is not always the best person. It also takes like 24 hours before the Queen family gets really worried about Thea. Sure, they mention it like the next morning. They're like, have you seen Thea? No, none of us have seen her. That's weird. But it isn't until the debate between Sebastian Blood and Moira Queen and a video question comes in from Thea of her being tied up and someone in Slade Wilson's mask like holding onto her head and right next to her. Moira thinks this is Malcolm. She's wrong. But, you know, that's all she knows about. She doesn't know about Slade. They do everything they can to try to figure out where the heck Slade is, and they end up finding him in an armchair, and he's like spouting off some stuff. But they use more Tibetan snake venom to knock him out and arrest him. But Slade has these flight records showing that he was out of town during the abduction and that he just got back in like 2 hours ago. These are obviously faked because he was in town. But they also treat the interrogation room, like, it's not bugged or being listened to ever in any sort of way, which I don't fully know if real police interrogation rooms are bugged or cameraed or anything, but like, do you want to use a little bit of caution literally in the police station? Just feels like something you should do when you're spouting out your evil plans right there in front of everybody. But all right, you know, to each their own. As soon as Slade gets back, he tells Thea that his whole plan was just to send a message and she can go. His men were just holding her until he got back. But before she leaves, does he want to know Oliver's secret? During this crisis, Oliver temporarily gives Isabel Rochev CEO rights. She's been like half CEO when she bought out almost a majority of the company while Oliver was gone. But while she has the full CEO rights, she immediately calls an emergency board meeting and takes the CEO power permanently from Oliver. Mainly because, like, he's never there. So the board's like, hell yeah, man. We'd much rather have you, the person who's been here this whole time, than Oliver, just the person whose last name is Queen. They also find out that Isabel is working with Slade, and this was actually part of her plan, was to work with him so that eventually she would get CEO rights and she'd be able to keep them. Oliver and Isabel fight together, and they find out that Isabel used to be in a relationship with Oliver's father, and Oliver's father was going to be leaving the whole family for her until he got a call from Moira about Thea. She had like hurt her arm or something, and that convinced him to like come back. So she's real spiteful and is not a big fan. She does tell Oliver where Thea's being held, and when he gets there, you know, Thea's like, I know your secret, that Malcolm Merlin is my father. So she knows now she's not taking it well. As soon as Isabel has control over Queen Consolidated, she has them start making the Mirakuru in their Applied Sciences building. At the very end of this episode, also Slade visits Laurel to tell Laurel that Oliver is the Arrow, hoping that this was gonna, you know, further mess him up, but Laurel ends up like kind of keeping it to herself for a really long time. Oh, and the gang finally noticed that Roy skipped town when Oliver told him he couldn't see Thea anymore. He eventually just left. When the gang head back down into the little bat cave, they find Slade. And they get into a big fight. And Sarah ends up having to go to the hospital. And Laurel finds out about her scars. Because the doctor is like, I haven't seen scars like this since a person who was in the military. Was your sister in the military? Nope. And she's able to put together, if Oliver is the Arrow, Sarah is the girl in black, or the Canary as we know her. Thea's not taking this news about her parentage well at all. She's, you know, constantly talking about how she's not the daughter of one mass murderer, but two mass murderers. Great way to look at it, but I mean, she's not wrong. While Slade was in the Batcave, he had stolen the skeleton key. While Slade was in the little Batcave, he had stolen the skeleton key that Tuckman had used to get into those bank vaults. And he uses it to steal a new industrial centrifuge, or at least that's his plan. We cut to Cisco and Caitlin, who are from the Flash series. I will be getting very deep into who they are when I talk about the Flash, so don't worry about that. Just know they work for Star Labs. They are doing inventory of a Star Labs warehouse that's in Starling City, because now that the particle accelerator blew a hole in Central City, Starling City really doesn't want anything to do with them. And they start running away from Slade because he shows up, and they accidentally bring him directly to the thing he wants, which is a machine that can infuse blood from one person into like 20 people at once. So they're pretty sure that he's going to be using that to like filter the Mirakuru through someone who can already handle it into more people, so it'll have a higher success rate. And they're pretty sure, you know, that's going to weaken him. So they need to go and get get him while he's weak and on the machine. They show up and Roy's there because Slade found where Roy ran off to and kidnapped him, because that's what he does. He kidnaps people and put him on the machine because he survived the Mirakuru. Oliver takes Roy off the transfusion machine before it's done, so Roy's really weak and also pumped full of like extra Mirakuru right now. And when he wakes up, he is seriously roided out on the Mirakuru. He doesn't seem like a human anymore. And he eventually goes off on like a rampage through town. Like if you leave him alone, he's fine. But the second anyone interacts with him, he breaks their arm or like pulls their shoulder back, and he's on some kind of rampage. He even throws his friend Sin. Like that's how much, like, it doesn't matter. Anybody who tries to interact with him gets tossed around. Moira, seeing that Thea is going through a really hard time, is kind of wanting to drop out of the mayoral race to spend more time with her. And she plans on making a speech at her next rally about stepping down. While Roy is going through town, he keeps seeing a phantom Thea that's telling him that he needs to go kill her because she treated him terribly and she left him and stuff like that. And she hurt him, so she deserves it. And Moira ends up telling Oliver that she knows he's the Arrow and that she's proud of him, and they have a little conversation that eventually gets Moira to decide she wants to stay in the campaign. During this episode, I know I don't talk about the flashbacks too much, but I've mentioned them a little bit. But during this episode, we learn past Oliver, before the boat, got a girl pregnant. And past Moira invited the girl over and says she wants her grandchild to have a very good life, but she also really wants her son to have a really good life, so she gives the girl $2 million to leave town, go to Central City where she has some family, and never talk to Oliver again. Tell Oliver she lost the baby, never speak of it again. She didn't lose the baby, and eventually this baby comes back into the story, which is why I wanted to mention it. But like, that's the kind of dedication Moira has to keeping her children safe. But after this conversation with Oliver in the present day, she decides to continue to run for mayor. During this rally, instead of announcing her resignation, she ends up, just calling for more votes. And while the cameras are running, Thea jumps up and she's like, I love my mom, and I'm just proud to be standing here in my club in the Glades. And she like gives her location, hoping that Roy will see it and come to her, which he does, but he is still really roided out and like trying to kill her. Luckily, the Arrow is able to come in and hits him with a venom arrow, which puts him out, and they end up putting him on like a constant drip of venom in order to keep him sedated for a long time. But now Sarah is doing the I care too much for you, so we need to break up thing, and she ends up leaving town like right before the the Slade stuff is really pumping up, and she's like, I gotta go, peace. I don't know, it seems like a really weird time to decide to leave, but she does. After this rally, Moira ends up deciding to come clean to her kids, and they're in a car, and she's about to tell them that Malcolm Merlyn is still alive. But Slade hits their car and ties up all three of them and puts them in the same position that Shadow, Oliver, and Sarah were in, and he's threatening to kill one of them, and he has to choose. He's putting him in the exact same position Oliver was in back on the island. And Moira thinks if she offers herself up to be killed, then her kids will be able to go home. And it doesn't really go how she plans. He does end up killing Moira, but he tells Oliver that one more will die before this is over. Now they're orphans. Not fun. Blood gets sworn in as mayor because he's now the only one running. Moira's gone. And Oliver goes a little AWOL. He doesn't end up showing up to the funeral or the reception. And Deagle goes to Amanda Waller for help tracking him. In the absence of both parents and Oliver, Walter shows up to help Thea through the transition of it all. The funeral, the reception, and proving that he is once again one of the best fucking characters in this show. He really just steps up for these kids, no matter how much crap Moira had put him through, no matter what. He's here for these dang kids because he knows they are innocents in most of this. Like, such a good character. I just wish everyone else was just so good like him. Amanda Waller does end up finding Oliver. He's in this little bunker that he got as a secondary training location in case the little bat cave that they're in right now got compromised. Which is good because Isabel is using her new powers as CEO to officially reclaim all of Queen Consolidated's assets, including the club and warehouse that it's in, and also the Queen home. So now they are homeless. In order to get Oliver kind of back out of his slump, Laurel shows up, not only proving that she knows he's the Arrow, but she also tells him everything she knows about Sebastian Blood. That he's, he did kill his parents. He also had a letter that he was writing. It was a press release about, showing his remorse for Moira's passing, but it was written a day before Moira died. So maybe he should check his timestamps before he starts writing stuff like that. But, hey. And they now know that Sebastian Blood is working for Slade, and he's the man in the mask, the skull mask, and it's... So Oliver invites him out to dinner and confronts him about it and tells him that he's the Arrow and that Blood is an idiot for working with Slade. Right after this dinner, 9 o'clock hits, and a bunch of Slade's men that have been kind of positioned and sprinkled throughout town start going off, start riots. The rest of them are in like a basement of a building, which the team is trying to like drop a whole building on them. But stuff goes wrong, and Laurel and Oliver end up getting like trapped in a tunnel with Laura on one side and Oliver on the outside. Luckily, Laurel is in there with Oliver's arrows and is able to pull back and shoot an explosive arrow, proving she's already, got decent aim with an arrow. Maybe that'll come in to play next season. Blood, as the mayor, is blocking the National Guard from coming to help the people of Starling. He says it'll only cause mass hysteria. But the DA's kind of like, this guy kind of seems like he wants this to happen. It's weird that he would block the National Guard from helping when these super soldier-like people that she even says, like, these people don't seem human, are just tearing up the city. Thea, who was trying to leave town now that she's homeless and penniless and feels like she can't really trust anybody. But while she was waiting for the train, 9 o'clock hit, and one of Slade's men were in the train station. Really lucky for her, Malcolm Merlin found out somehow that shit was going down, and he shows up to save her and be like her personal bodyguard. She's not happy about it, but he's there. A while back, Felicity had asked Star Labs if they could find a cure for the Mirakuru, because they had gotten a little bit of a sample, and they did. They found a cure. And they are sending a courier en route to Starling during this attack. But his car flips, because of course it does. And we also find out that Sarah's back in town, mostly to help Laurel. And Laurel tells her that she knows and stuff, but during the craziness, one of the masked men come in and just destroy the entire mayor's office. And Sebastian Blood's like, what the hell, man? You weren't supposed to do this. He's like, I don't take orders from you. And Sebastian Blood realizes he can't control Slade, and he might be in over his head and might not know what's really going on. Slade's men is also keeping the Arrow and the van that he's in from getting to the bridge where the courier is, and Thea's trying to get away from Malcolm, but he's following her and stuff, and Now that Blood knows that Slade is not what he said he was, Slade's men ends up getting to the cure right before Oliver can. And once Blood is in the room with it, he ends up stealing it and calling Oliver and being like, I have the stuff, you can come get this. And he's also under the weird impression that he's still going to be mayor after all of this. Like, this isn't going to come and haunt him in any way. Don't worry, he gets over that when Slade finds out he stole the Mirakuru and sends Isabel, who's now also been super soldiered, to kill him. Don't worry, he's not the mayor anymore. They are going to try to test the cure out on Roy, who's still down for the count with snake venom in him. They're a little nervous until they see on the news a bunch of army vehicles and helicopters are coming in, but the nearest army base isn't for 300 miles. It's no way they could have got here in time. But an Argus base is a lot closer. And they call Amanda Waller, and it turns out she is sending people to block off the exits and a drone to level the city, which pisses Oliver off enough that he slams that cure directly into Roy's chest, which it does luckily work. It doesn't hurt him. Oh, thank God. That definitely could have been bad. But some of Slade's men show up in the clock tower, actually the one that Sarah had been staying in very early on in the season, to fuck up Slade. Luckily, Lila shows up with one of the helicopters and a freaking rocket launcher, blows them all up, which is super. Heck yeah, gives them a leg up. Thea, back at the train station with Malcolm, she holds him at gunpoint and he's, keeps pushing her and she shoots him. And he's so happy about it because he has a Kevlar vest on. Don't even worry about it. He's always got one on. I think he might at this point just have one inserted into his skin. There's no way to take it off. And he's proud of her for pulling the trigger because Tommy could never pull the trigger. And he now knows that she has what it takes to be a student of his. And he's so excited. He's so excited, which just freaks Thea out. Why are you like this? Turns out when Sarah came back into town, she didn't come by herself. She brought some of the League of Assassins to come help her. So they're really racking up this army here. While they're trying to get everybody, all the vulnerable people safe, Oliver takes Felicity back to his old house and hides her there. He lets her know that Laurel has been taken by Slade because Slade thinks that's the woman he loves. And Oliver tells Felicity that he was wrong. Slade, if he wanted to take the woman he loved, he would have to take Felicity because he loves her. But Slade put all those cameras in the house. So Slade hears this and goes to the house and kidnaps Felicity. Very lucky for everyone. This was part of Oliver's plan. He had found the cameras long ago, and this was a fully planted conversation, and he'd actually handed Felicity a vial. So she's ready. During this, all of Slade's men converge on one tunnel and end up killing all the Argus men that are within it. They're about to start escaping and getting out into the general public before the Arrows team shows up. And they just take them all out. Done. While they're in the tunnel taking them out, Deagle and Lila are actually at the Argus station and trying to convince Amanda Waller to not do the drone strike. And Amanda uses this opportunity to let Deagle know that Lila is pregnant with Deagle's child. Luckily, like I said, Oliver planned on Slade hearing about Felicity. And so when Oliver goes to protect Felicity, she actually whips around, puts a cure directly into his neck, goes back to being a normal boy. And they're able to finally fight him. They subdue him enough to get the official win for the day. Oliver calls Amanda to get the drone strike called off, and they are literally just in time in order to do this. The planes flew over their heads. It was so close. It was so close. Laurel and Lance say goodbye to Sarah at the docks because Sarah has agreed to go back to the League of Assassins. While they're leaving, Laurel notices Lance starts coughing up and he starts grabbing his abdomen. He falls over and they see he hit his stomach at some point. He's been internally bleeding for who knows how long. He's like coughing up blood, and Laurel calls the ambulance, and we don't get any resolution to that. This is the final episode. And Roy, who had asked Thea to his house and was planning on running away with her, shows back up to find she found his bow and arrows that he was using to practice with Oliver, and she left a note that she can't trust anyone there, and she's going to decide to be strong and leave with Malcolm Merlyn rather than letting people continue to lie to her. We cut to Slade waking up in his brand new special prison on Lian-Yu. He's back, baby. Oliver and Felicity have a quick little discussion. Oliver said that he loved her. Was that like, obviously that was just to trick Slade, right? Like that wasn't real. And I mean, Oliver doesn't say no, and he kind of looks in his eyes like maybe he meant it a little bit, but he wants her to think it was fake because maybe he wasn't actually ready to talk about it. And when he's saying goodbye to Slade, he actually calls himself a hero. He describes himself as a hero, which is the first time he uses that word, like, for real. And that's how we end season 2 of Arrow. Oh, we made it. This show is so much denser than I always remember it to be. Like, I watched this years ago, stopped watching it because I got kind of lost in the sauce, and then I thought some of this stuff happened in like the 3rd or 4th season, and this is all 2nd season stuff. Goodness, there's so much. Like I said, I plan on doing Flash starting next month, so hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching.
You can check out our website for all the content we produce.
Clicking all those YouTube buttons makes it so you see more content from myself and the other amazing creators at Kai's Corner Productions. All donations help us produce more stuff like that for you.
See you guys in the next one. Peace.